Everyone, my name is Jason Frank. I'm the president of Nottingham Investment Services. I could not be more excited to welcome everyone to our first quarter client webinar. We'll spend the next 30 or 40 minutes with George walking us through a captivating presentation. He's going to pose a number of sort of virtual questions for all of you to consider at home. And as always, to the extent that you have questions post-event, please reach back out to whoever the professional is that invited you to this evening's webinar, and they'll be able to partner with George, connect you directly with George, and or answer any questions that you may have. So with that said, George, so appreciate you being available for us this evening. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you join our organization. And I know that all of our advisors, trust officers, and clients have really appreciated your early engagements and sort of what's to come. So with that said, why don't I get out of the way and hand off to you and let you take it from here?
Okay, sounds great. It is really great to be here. And as Jason just said, been in the industry, 25-ish years or so, was in banking actually for many years before that. And what you're going to hear tonight is really kind of collections of things that I have heard along the way. I've kind of developed an understanding of the work that I've done. In addition to that, I'm working with other thought leaders in the industry that talk about the topics we're talking about today. Some of these were going to sound really familiar, and that's okay, because that's just affirmation that it's still solid ground that you're standing on. Others might be brand new, but the most important thing is that whatever idea that you gain from this, or however many ideas that is, you don't have to do everything all at once. Now, as we get started, I want to do something very special for you as we get going here. And that is, when you decided to join this session here, you probably had a reason for that. Maybe it was a question that you had, you were thinking about, it was about a goal, or something you want to work toward, or a money question of finance in your financial life that you're really trying to get some clarity around. I invite you to write or just to pause for a moment, make a note of that, and reflect on that for just a moment, because it's important that you take away what's important to you, right? So if you're taking notes, you can write a thought or question along the way as well, and we'll come back to this a little bit later as well. The goal is to cover all this information, but hopefully I'm not overwhelming you and giving you too much information. That's why I want you to kind of focus on one or two things. That way it'll help you get started. And by there, you can do this one conversation at a time. So the 10 things that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be covering today, cover a lot of territory. Now you're going to see some funny things on the screen, perhaps some labels that are on this list here that might not seem like money related, but they are very much so. And we'll learn about that here in just a moment. And as you had that moment to kind of reflect on why you were here, I want you to think too about this kind of what's happening right now. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, a lot of noise, a lot of uncertainty that's happening. And so today is about gaining some clarity because we want to control what we can control. That's the purpose of walking through these ideas today, is to suggest some of these things that you can do. And we're going to walk through each one of these individually, and you're going to see there's actually 5 things underneath. So Jason, maybe we could say there's 50 things that were ideas and all said and done, perhaps. But in all, what we're talking about is where do we get started? That's where we kind of get going out of the gate. And that is when we start down this process of thinking about money in our life, we always struggle with this idea of where do we get going? So let's start with that. Having some sense of direction is one of the most important and helpful things we can have when it comes to managing money. But if you've ever felt unsure about where to begin, don't worry, you're not alone. A lot of people feel this way. And I have felt like that myself in my life as well, because there are a lot of moving parts. It can feel like you're being pulled in a lot of different directions and all at the same time as well. So rather than try to figure everything out all at once, today's conversation is about simplifying things, breaking it down into little bite-sized chunks, about creating a little clarity around what matters most to you right at the moment. And that's why we're going to walk through a few simple ideas to help you do that. Now, I want you to pause for just a moment and maybe work with me on something. I ask you to kind of write down what was the idea that brought you to the meeting today, perhaps a goal. Think about that for just a moment. I want you to also consider writing down perhaps 2 other goals that you might have right now too. Again, it's not about being perfect. It's about just getting something in your head out onto paper. Once you've done that, I'd like you to take a look at those 3 things, the reason why you were joining the call and the 2 other things you added, and then ask yourself this question. which one of these feels the most important to me and most pressing to me today? And which one can I wait on? Maybe write a little number to the left of the number of your statement, 1, 2, and 3, so that we can kind of prioritize those. To take it one step further, take and put a timeline next to it. And you put a rough time next to it, not as a commitment to say this is a line in the sand kind of thing. That's not what this is about. But it's really about to understand, is this a long-term kind of idea, or is this a short-term idea? This will become very important as we kind of move on in our conversation today. And so finally consider who you might share these ideas with. I have found that when I share my goals, my ideas with someone else, especially if they know me really well and can actually hold me accountable, it works, right? And folks, it really does work. So find someone that you can share this with, that you really want to work toward this, and you'll find that they might actually be there to help you as well. Just remember, this isn't a one-time exercise because life happens, things change. You may want to make adjustments along the way. So just be flexible about this. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's not what this is about. And we're going to review this from time to time as well, because we want to make sure that we're staying on track. So fine, we'll talk about ways to do that here in just a little bit. Now, this is an interesting quote that we see here. This is a famous quote by Albert Einstein. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and he who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. This is really about the concept of time as it relates to money. I know that most of you have probably heard the story before about you want to start early. Early bird catches the worm. You want to get started early. And I don't discount the importance of starting early, especially when it comes to saving money. But I also don't want you to think about, I wish I would have started sooner. Because a lot of us have felt that way at times, and that's okay. I hear you, but the past is fixed. We can't adjust that. The only thing that we can do is control what we can control, right? So whether you're just getting started or you're closer to retirement, there's always still valuable time to build new habits. And starting early is the most important thing. So let's talk about some ideas that can help us start early or take the next step. To build on this idea, what we're really talking about doing is staying consistent. So here's some thoughts. Some people start by opening or reviewing a retirement savings account. If they're looking at a retirement goal in the future, it's setting up a retirement account today. If you're looking at saving for a purchase of a new home or a car or some other goal, it's about opening a savings account today. But it's also about reviewing those that you may already have too. That could be just as important. Just understand that what you've already done and how those fit into your goals. That's really the idea here, is you're wanting to combine all these things and understand what's there to help you reach those goals. Other folks focus on doing little things like setting up automatic contributions. That is so easy and so simple because when saving happens automatically, it helps you stay consistent, because consistency is also critically important as much as it is about time. A small adjustment that you might consider doing is when you have a raise, take that 1% of your raise and apply it to your savings goals, as an example. You found yourself you were living okay before, maybe you'll still live okay with a 2% raise, but at least you've got some more money going towards your goals in the long term. But check in periodically as well, because you want to track your progress to make sure that you're staying on track with where you are. It's about being aware of whether or not you need to make any changes. Now, the last one on this list is really important. I am all about having fun in life. You talk to anybody that I know, they'll tell you about my Disney trips and everything else. I love doing things to have fun with and creating memories. And so it's worth remembering that progress doesn't have to be all or nothing. It is celebrating small wins along the way. So find little ways to kind of pamper yourself along the way as well. So I was looking for a great picture to talk about habits, and I found this one, and it really stood out to me. There's no question in my mind that we are driven by the habits that we have, and inertia driven by those habits. Over time, these habits can pile up, and they get all tangled together. And when I saw this, it really made me think about how life can feel overwhelming and absolutely chaotic at times, and about how and of course, how our habits actually contribute to that is also an important thing. Um, what I learned when I was younger, though, is that there's ways to look at how we might unwind this. See, when I was a kid, my mom used to give me the knots to untangle. I don't know if it was because it would keep me busy or if it's because I was just really good at it. But one of the two things, I did stay busy and I did get really good at it, I guess. And I learned something really interesting from that experience. I learned that you don't fix that big knot by doing it all at once. You had to find one strand, follow it all the way back to the beginning. So you just basically focus on just that one piece, and the knot slowly kind of starts to loosen. Our habits are very similar. Instead of trying to change everything all at once, it can be help you pick out one habit, focus on it, and get it under control. One thing at a time. That's the most important thing. And from there, as things start to unwind, that's how we begin letting go of old habits and replacing them with better ones. So what does that look like? The previous slide was choosing one strand to focus on. This slide is actually really about helping you support the new habit you've just found, that one strand, right? What a lot of people will do, sound familiar? Automate savings, right? That's what happens, right? If we set up an automated savings kind of process, it really is about out of sight, out of mind. And so that's very helpful in saving for long-term goals as well as even short-term goals. It just removes the need to make the decision to do something over and over again. The same idea applies to automatic bill payment or retirement contributions as other examples that you can look at. Another approach is attaching a new habit to an existing habit. Now, that sounds a little interesting, doesn't it? So imagine for a moment you file taxes every year. Okay, everybody is filing taxes every year. I know that. And you probably love that activity. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, for that matter. But consider this. When you're doing your taxes, it's a perfect time to evaluate and to look at your financial goals because you already have to do your taxes. So why not do your financial review at the same time? So you're combining, if you don't have a habit of reviewing your financial outcomes or your roadmap, if you will, that's a great time to combine those two things together. So at the end of the day, it's about not about doing everything at once, just find one little thing and about adding it to that. So see if you can get creative on that and find other ways to add habits together. Some old habits that are really, really solid for you, and then adding new habits to that. So you have likely heard the saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I'm almost certain of this. And I want to push back on this idea because you heard me say this a little bit earlier. I like to have a little bit of fun. I think it's possible to enjoy life and to be thoughtful about money at the same time. In fact, many, many years ago, my father-in-law, unfortunately, was diagnosed with a very difficult illness. And he thought he had all this time ahead of him. And one of the things he said to me was the importance of enjoying life along the way because we only have one life to live. And life is worth living. And money, at its core, it's really just a tool. So the idea isn't about being reckless and going out and being haphazard in how we actually spend money. It's about recognizing the balance. That enjoying your money when it's done intentionally is also part of the plan and not necessarily failure of carrying out your plan. So let's dig into that just a little bit and have some cake here. So if life is worth living and money is really just a tool and the goal just becomes balance, right? You control the money, it doesn't control you. And that balance usually comes from focusing on what you can control, especially how your spending lines up with what matters most. So when spending reflects your goals and your values, it stops feeling less like a free-for-all and a bit more like being intentional. And there's no guilt involved in that. So guilt-free doesn't mean careless, it just means being thoughtful. So I'll give you an example. I go to this coffee shop near my house on a pretty regular basis, and there's one guy that's in there that I see all the time. We got to know each other a little bit, and he's been going there for years, and he goes in pretty much every day. And I got to talking to him about as he was preparing for retirement. And one of the things he shared with me as he was reading his book one day when I walked in, I asked him how retirement was going. He said it's been going great, and he's loving it. And I said, I'm just curious. I said, so did your plan include coming to the coffee shop, kind of jokingly? And he said, yes, it absolutely did. His plan included the ability to go to the coffee shop every single day. He built it into his plan. So there was no guilt around going to it. Some people might look at that and say, don't spend the $5 going in there every day. But he built it into his plan. So if those coffee runs had been getting in the way of his long-term plans, there's no doubt in my mind he probably would have had a different conversation with himself about that. But they weren't, and they were part of that plan. And so the same idea is to experiences, whether you're taking trips, enjoying, family time with doing fun things or creating memories, all of those things are part of our life, and they become dividends that we can cash in later. I refer to those as memory dividends. And by the way, you find yourself probably cashing those in all the time right now. That's when you get around the dinner table and you're having conversations with the family, with the kids, and kind of laughing and joking about things that happened in the past. Those are memory dividends. And so it's really great to be able to do that and can control and build those out along the way. What if? When I was growing up, my mom used to call me the what if kid because every single thing that came up, I used to say, what if this and what if that? Well, I want to talk about those moments that we never seen coming. That's really when we think about what if, that's really what this is about. Think about a time right now. If you want to close your eyes and for a moment, think about a time when something happened that was completely out of your control. It could have been a weather event, it could have been a car accident, a health issue, or an expense when you least expected it. Right? In those moments, everything can feel really urgent. And the last thing anyone wants is to be scrambling financially. I understand this. And that's the real question here. When those things happen, what do you do? And how do you prepare for what's ahead? A situation that feels to make it feel less overwhelming. That's what we're going to spend some time talking about now. This is where the emergency fund really pays dividends for you. People often ask me the question, George, how much should I have in my emergency fund? And you're probably going to hear the usual answer that everybody probably you hear people say, like, and that is, it depends, right? Every situation is slightly different. And where you land, it'll be a range of a lot of factors like job stability, income variability, personal comfort level. For some people, it's I've got to have 3 times 12 months expenses. Others like, well, I'm fine with 6 months because I have a very solid job, as an example. So the goal here isn't about specifically perfection. It's about having access to cash for things that you might need, like medical deductibles, auto or home insurance deductibles. If you have we had a hailstorm here recently, and we had to get a new roof. And fortunately, it was covered, but we had to make sure that we had coverage for the deductibles, medical events as well. Had a major medical expense here recently, and my wife and I had to come up with, of course, the deductible. So that was part of our plan. Other unexpected costs that tend to show up at the worst possible time, too. You all know that there's never perfect timing in any of this. So emergency fund isn't fully in place yet. You might find yourself turning to credit. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but you want to consider that as a temporary solution. It's helpful to think about ahead about how that balance will get paid off and down afterward rather than letting it linger there for many, many years, because then it ends up costing you more than the original event itself. So protecting your finances is the only thing that we want to think about when it comes to preparing. I actually have a friend of mine he's an emergency preparation expert. He wrote a book on it, and he often talks to me about the importance of being prepared for national or for like weather emergencies and that kind of tear up a whole city as an example. And he's gone many, many places in the country to help people with that. He talks about 2 things. He talks about having a go bag or a go kit. And so that way, if you have to leave your house in 30 seconds, you've got something to take with you. And then having a plan. Where do you go, right? What happens if your family has to exit the house very quickly? Where do you go? What do you take with you? Would your family know how to reconnect if you were separated? These are all conversations you want to have at your dinner table with your kids and talk about that. He used to actually run drills in his house at 2 a.m. His wife didn't like that very well, but he would have the alarms go off, and then they would have to. His kids were literally learning how to climb out their second floor window, and he would not help them because they had to be able to do it on their own. But they practiced. They did rehearse these things. Like I said, his wife wasn't real crazy about him doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it was very effective. And remember, above all, don't forget the pets. It's when things happen and all high emotions are high, it's easy for those things to get slipped because dogs, cats, they get very scared in these moments as well. And sometimes you may not even see them, but they're there hiding somewhere in the dark. So don't forget the pets in all of this. Now, when it comes to protecting yourself, just think of an umbrella, right? So we got the what if things that we just talked about on the preparation side. Now, how do we protect ourselves? Think of an umbrella. You've seen the commercials, I'm sure. Most of us already do a lot of different things when it comes to this area of our lives and about protecting ourselves. The purpose here is I don't want to go into details about how insurance policies work. That's not really the purpose here. It's really to gain awareness of the kind of protection that you do have in place. Maybe it's just a way for you to kind of say, "Yep, I've got that. I got that. I got that." And we'll talk a little bit more about that, what that awareness that you want to focus your attention on. Bringing the umbrella, making sure we have the right kind of coverage will be for things like your family, your income, and your stuff. Just remember that. It's a very simple phrase, right? And so I also want you to think about the importance of looking at disability and the insurance that you might have through work too, because that could also be part of this coverage. All of these things are designed to provide protect you and provide your family in the event of a loss, whether it's damage to property, medical, or ability to make income. So I don't want you to understand all the nitty-gritty of the details of this moment because that's what your annual review is with your financial advisor or with your property casualty agent. So this is something that I have done for many years. I actually have an annual review with my property casualty agent every year, and it's about this time actually every year as well. So I expect that phone call to come in because they actually initiate that with me each year. And there's been more than once, and I've been doing this a long time, and I've gotten pretty comfortable with those policies. But at the same time, things change, and I didn't even notice it. A few years ago, for example, we had some changes made to our backup sewer and drain, and I realized, oh my gosh, if we actually have that event today, I've got to have a much bigger, I have to pay a much bigger portion of those expenses if that the same thing were to happen again. And so that kept me from, kept me from making a mistake of not knowing that later, right? So the same can apply to any other thing that happens in our life. So when we think about coverages, think about things about major life changes, such as marriage, divorce, children, kids leaving home, parents moving in, even getting a pet can also make a check. We might need to make some adjustments to the kind of coverage that you have. And from time to time, you might want to compare insurance quotes as well. And don't just choose the lowest number, choose one that actually fits your situation. I think that's also a very important thing to do. And then make sure that you have all your documents stored in a very nice, safe place and that they're accessible. So some documents are okay to go in like a strong box or safety deposit box, but if you need access to them in the event of an emergency, it's going to be difficult to get to them. So find a way to store them. So some clients I know some individuals I know will actually use online storage systems either through the financial advisor or through other cloud systems that are protected. All right, you heard me say something a little bit earlier about having fun. All right, let's have some real fun now. When my dad was 92 years old, he moved in with us, and I became his primary caregiver. And one of the most challenging things that we faced with him was he couldn't drive anymore. It's kind of a condition of him moving in. He would live in a small town, he was moving into a very busy city. And I just said, Dad, it's just not going to be safe for you to drive anymore. And that's where this question actually comes from, this idea that who will take me to get ice cream? It sounds kind of silly in one way, but at the same time, it's like it represents so much more. It's a much bigger impact than we think it does. What would happen if you reach a point in your life where you needed help doing the things that you would normally do on your own? We don't really think about that very much in advance. And not because we don't care, but because we think it's so far away or it's uncomfortable and it's easy to kind of set, kind of out of sight, out of mind, right? So this is really about creating independence for yourself, dignity, and choice as we get older. But I also want you to think about this not as we get older too, although I'll do that in a context here. I want you to think about it could happen at any age. I was sharing with some family or with some friends earlier today that I actually have a nephew who's going through a very kind of tragic situation right now, and it's going to take him 6 to 7 months to actually recover from that. And he needs a lot of care right now, a lot of help. He cannot go get ice cream by himself right now. So it can happen to any one of us, and it's important to have a plan of care in place. So that's what we're going to talk about next. And we're going to do that by answering 3 simple questions. Who will take me to get ice cream? Who will change my light bulb? And who will I go to lunch with? Each one of these represent a unique part of our life that are connected to things that we can or can no longer, that we can't do anymore the way that we used to. Who will take me to get ice cream? As I mentioned before, it's about mobility, freedom, and staying connected. Who will change my light bulb? This one tends to catch people off guard a little bit because we don't really think that much about it. But it's about the risky things in life: home maintenance, safety, climbing up on a ladder, standing up on a chair, stacking boxes together, whatever. Doing things that you used to be able to do on your own or maybe not be able to do later. My father, when he moved in, one of the things that he had moved out of was his house, and going into his basement where his laundry was, his basement stairs it was built like in the late 1800s. It was literally almost like going down a ladder every time he's going up and down carrying his basket of clothes. That just wasn't tenable anymore. The third question is who I have lunch with is based upon research related to strong social connections, how much they play an important role. So these questions are actually developed by a team at MIT Age Labs. Dr. Joe Coughlin has done a lot of work in the aging space, and these are the questions that he's come up with to kind of help us kind of navigate these conversations. And so I encourage you to kind of have those continued conversations about it because creating a plan of care is really important. And the purpose of the plan of care is really the bottom line is about If you do end up needing care, of course, it's a matter of when, not if, in many cases. It is when it does happen, it's about who do you want involved? What kind of help do you want? Where do you want the care to happen? How do you want to pay for it? How do you want those decisions to be made? And by the way, who don't you want involved in that process? I've known people who come up with a list of people who they don't want involved faster than the list of people they want involved. So it's important to recognize that and have those conversations early. Your legacy. Okay, we're not gonna get technical, don't worry. I know you might be thinking here. I've got the word estate planning on the screen and your legacy. And it can be very technical, and I do understand that. And it does get complicated very quickly in some cases. But today, what I want to share with you, this will simplify this in such a way that you'll be able to think clearly about this the next time you talk to an attorney about updating your own personal estate plan. Simply put, estate planning is about getting the right assets to the right people at the right time in the right way. That's it. Just remember that. Because every one of us on this call today, and Jason and I both, we all own things. We have a car, we have money in the bank, we have a home, perhaps, investments, retirement accounts, personal items that matter to us. When we are gone, all of that stays behind. So the real question is what happens to all of that? Who do you want it to go to? When should they receive it? Should it be passed along or sold? Maybe the most important question is who do you want making those decisions? Equally as important for some, it's that legacy is not always just about the things that we own. It's about who we are, our values, our beliefs, what matters most to us, and how do we pass that along as well? And that becomes part of our assets too. I've seen many families pass along meaningful things through letters, shared values, stories, videos on things that they stood for. And those matter just as much as those financial assets. So we want to combine all of those things into doing the bottom line, which is being intentional. I know it can get complex, but working with a financial professional in this process, it'll kind of help you navigate through the complexities of it. And just remembering, estate planning is about getting the right assets to the right people at the right time in the right way will help you understand to keep your intentions clear and then get it documented. And you can even begin working on that before you meet with the attorney as well. All right, let me check in with you. We're about 30 minutes in. How are we doing right now? Are you feeling pretty good? Have you seen some things that you haven't seen before? Or have you seen a lot of things that maybe you haven't seen before? If you've seen a few things on here that seem like, yeah, I already knew those 20 things that George just said, great. That's just affirmation that you're still on solid footing, right? That just means that you're actually doing things, or maybe you understand things the way that you had always done. And that's great. If you learned one or two things, that's good too. Like any plan along the way, we're going to check in. So we're going to talk about checking in right now as it relates to our financial plan. Now, some of this we've kind of talked about just a little bit as well. When we talk about checking in, about once a year is what typically makes most sense. And for most people, that's what we do. And you do this very simply by putting a time on your calendar, scheduling a time, and give yourself maybe a couple hours on a weekend once a year to kind of walk through things. Like we learned earlier, perhaps you can even attach this to the same habit that you have regarding preparing your tax returns, right? Because you're already collecting all your financial information. So why not do both at the same time? This review provides you with an opportunity to compare where you are today as it relates to the goals that you care about and determine whether you feel like anything is out of alignment, right? It's all about aligning actions and intentions, right? And so that will help you stay aligned. Other people will use this time to update their savings account and their spending plans, and especially if circumstances change. If you find you had some of those things like, marriage, divorce, kids, empty nester, those kinds of things that are part of your life, then you can certainly look at those as how do I need to make sure I review those. And that's where reviewing beneficiaries is so important too. Because if you have life circumstances where people are changing positions or coming in and out of your life, you want to review your beneficiaries, especially if they were part of that, because that may not reflect your intentions anymore. Finally, this could be a great time to check for blind spots by meeting with a financial professional. Not because you've done anything wrong specifically, but because, quite frankly, it's hard to see everything when you're inside your own situation. And so this just gives you additional objectivity for yourself. And with that in mind, I'd like to kind of end on this idea, and that is, what if you feel like you're overwhelmed or you do need help? And let's talk through some thoughts on when you might want to consider hiring a financial professional. When people ask me this question, they'll usually surprised when I say most of the time it's not because they couldn't do it on their own, because I've met many people who are smart and capable and were handling things for the most part. But sometimes they reach a point where they felt stuck or they wanted a second opinion. And the ability for us to bring in a collective set of knowledge or experience, we bring additional objectivity into that conversation. That helps us uncover the blind spots that we were talking about just a bit ago. Because when you're inside the picture, you can't, it's hard to see the frame when you are inside the picture, right? Other times it's about saving time. Not because you may not know what to do, but because you'd really rather be doing something else instead of sitting there looking out a window watching your kids play in the yard on a weekend while you're sitting there looking through all the financials. Maybe you'd rather be out there with them, spending time with the family, focusing on the work you enjoy, perhaps, or even simplifying and reducing complexity in your life. Most importantly, the reason that I think that many people might want to consider hiring a professional is to bring continuity. I'll give you just kind of an example. I shared a little bit of the idea about my father-in-law who was diagnosed with a disease that ultimately he did not survive from. And at that point in time, he did everything for the family. And in that moment, he realized that that was not going to be tenable for the family. And so he brought together a team of people to actually help all of us mourn him when he left this earth. He was able to give us that gift of being able to mourn his loss without having to make all those heavy decisions because all those people jumped in. That brought us continuity along the way. And now we have the opportunity to do that with our family as well. And so continuity can be a huge piece to that. Remember, hiring a help from the outside is not about giving up control. It's about taking control and ensuring your voice is still there when you can't be there. So with that in mind, again, we've talked about a lot of things. Jason, we've talked like 50 different items under each one of these 10 on the slides. And with that, and I just realized I don't think that slide that forwarded, did it? Now that you say that, you heard me describe all these things, and I apologize. I just realized the slide didn't move forward. You need additional objectivity to help uncover blind spots, to save you time, and when you need access to additional resources. Sometimes there's tools and resources that a professional will have access to that perhaps you might not have access to. And of course, as I said before, about bringing additional continuity in there. Now I want you to kind of think about, I'm not going to force you to do this. This is all on you. But I want you to really give this consideration. You've heard a lot of ideas, and maybe there's just one or two that stand out to you. Maybe it's the one thing that brought you to the meeting right now. To help with that, I want to show you a tool that I've used for many years. It's called the CORE process. It was developed by an organization called Giant Worldwide, an international leadership training organization. And it's about calling it, owning it, responding, and executing. Just breaking this down to simple actions. So the first thing we do in all of this is, what's that one thing that you had on your list that you said, I like what George said on slide number 15, line number 4, that's what I want to focus my attention on. Whatever that is, or whether it's the first thing you wrote when you started, write it down and then take the time, not right now, but take the time after we finish this call today and write out everything that's going on around it. What's the idea? What's actually working? What's not working? And what do you need to learn in order to address that particular issue? So call it out. The next thing I want you to consider doing is owning it. Describe what you're doing or what you're not doing around this one particular thing, right? What you can stop doing and start doing, right? Be honest with yourself. This is all between you and yourself, by the way. No one else is going to see this unless you show it to them. This part is just for you. But describe what you're doing, not doing around this one thing that you're trying to accomplish. The next thing is create a response to that. What's one small step you can take today, tomorrow, the next 7 days? Not the whole thing all at once, right? Just one step that you can take. And then the last thing here is to execute. When you finally do take that step, you might consider sharing this with someone else to gain more accountability. So I would encourage you to do that. We talked about that at the very beginning, about the power of sharing these ideas, these goals with others can be very helpful here when we talk about the CORE process as well. So, with that in mind, I just want to remind you that progress isn't about doing everything all at once. It's about small, consistent actions over time. And that's what I would consider the 10 ideas related to having a stronger financial future. So, Jason, come back to you. I appreciate everything.
George, thank you. I hear you present multiple times a week. I always love hearing you speak. You put so many thought-provoking topics out there. I couldn't be more grateful for your partnership, and I know that all of our advisors feel the same. And for those clients that you've already been able to interact with, I'm sure they feel the same. So, for everyone out on the line, I truly hope this session and some of the others that we've hosted have added value for you. We want to continue to bring thoughtful content to you and your family on a quarterly basis. There's a very broad menu of options that you have access to, and it's our mission to make sure you're aware of all of them. I am supremely confident we can help with absolutely everything that George covered today. And so I would encourage you, George always forces me to think about things that are uncomfortable, to explore things that are uncomfortable, to talk about them. I would encourage you to do that with your wealth advisor. Let us help with those blind spots. So with that said, George, massive thank you once again
You're
for
welcome.
everyone on the line. Thank you for your business. We very much so look forward to seeing you again in Q2. We'll have a topic and invites ready in the coming weeks and months. And I wish you all well for the remainder of the evening. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks again, George. Take care.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.